5 years after the battle that shocked the galaxy, Earth stood at the center of a new order. Ships from dozens of species traveled to human worlds seeking alliances, seeking friendship, seeking to be on the right side of history. The Galactic Council reformed its laws, creating protections for species that helped others. High Chancellor Wu retired quietly, replaced by leaders who spoke of compassion and cooperation. But something was wrong. President Sung sat in her office on Earth, reading reports that made her heart heavy. The reports were about the Velhari, and they told a story that humanity had never wanted to hear. The Velhari hadn't separated. Not fully. Not really. After demonstrating their power at New Velhara, they had maintained their quantum network, keeping billions of minds partially linked at all times. They had done it quietly without announcing it, but the reason was clear. They were standing guard. Protecting humanity, ready to defend Earth at a moment's notice, every moment of every day. For 5 years, they had lived in a state between individual and collective. For 5 years, they had endured. Dr. A.A., the daughter of Dr. Na, who had designed the original cryopod so long ago, made the discovery while studying Velhari biology. She stood before President Sung with tears in her eyes. "It's killing them," A said quietly. Not quickly, but steadily. The Velhari mind isn't meant to stay linked like this. Imagine having 12 billion voices in your head constantly, never having a moment of true silence or solitude. Now imagine that for 5 years straight. Why would they do this? Sung asked, though she already knew the answer. Because they're afraid. Afraid that the moment they separate, someone will attack us again. They've made themselves into humanity's shield and they won't let it down. Sung closed her eyes. This was her worst nightmare. Humanity had saved the Velhari so they could live freely, flourish, build new futures. Not so they could suffer in humanity's service. Ambassador Tay, now old but still serving at the council, brought more troubling news. Young Velhari, those born after the rescue, were growing up never knowing what it meant to be fully individual. They were born into the collective and stayed there, their minds never experiencing true separation. "We're creating a generation of guardians who don't know anything else," Tay told Sung during a private meeting. "Is that what we saved them for? To make them our eternal protectors?" But not everyone saw it as a problem. Admiral Young, who commanded Earth's expanded fleet, argued differently. "The Velhari chose this," Young said at a military briefing. "They're adults, free beings with their own will. If they want to protect us, who are we to stop them? Besides, we need them. The galaxy respects us now because they fear the Velhari. Take that away, and we're back to being the weak species everyone ignores." The debate spread across human worlds. Some agreed with Young, seeing the Velhari's protection as a gift that shouldn't be refused. Others sided with A and Sung, calling it a moral catastrophe to allow the Velhari to suffer for humanity's benefit. Captain Day, now 107 years old and barely able to leave her apartment, watched the debates on her screen. She had lived long enough to see her choice to save the Velhari praised, questioned, and now regretted by some. She contacted President Sung. "You need to talk to Quan directly. Not through ambassadors or official channels. Just you and him speaking truth." Sung took the old captain's advice. She traveled to New Velhara alone in a small ship without ceremony or guards. She found Elder Quan in a crystal garden, his form dimmer than she remembered, weakened by years of maintaining the link. "Elder Quan," she said softly, "we need to talk about what you're doing to yourselves." Quan's form flickered through sad colors. "You know? We know. And we can't let it continue." "You cannot stop us," Quan replied, but there was no anger in his voice. "We choose this freely." "Do you?" Sung sat on a bench carved from crystal. "Or are you trapped by gratitude? We saved you because we wanted you to live freely, to be happy, to flourish, not to suffer in our service. And we protect you because we cannot bear a galaxy where kindness is punished," Quan said. "Where those who sacrifice are destroyed. Where helping others leads to death. If we let that galaxy exist, then what was the point of being saved?" "The point was for you to live," Sung said, her voice breaking. "Just to live. That was always the point." They sat in silence for a long time. Around them, other Velhari moved through the garden, their forms all pulsing in the same rhythm, connected, never alone. "Then we have failed you," Sung finally said. "We saved your bodies but made you prisoners of your own gratitude. That's not saving. That's just a different kind of death." Quan's form brightened suddenly. You understand? After all these years, you truly understand. We have wanted to say this, but we feared you would see it as rejection of your gift. What do you want? Sung asked. Tell me truly. We want to live as individuals again. To have silence in our minds. To be separate and whole. But we also want to be able to protect you when needed. We want both, and we don't know how to have both. President Sung returned to Earth with a new mission. She assembled the best minds from both species, human and Velhari, working together. Dr. Ie led the effort, with a young Velhari scientist named Ra at her side. Ra was only 25, born after the rescue. He had never known true separation, had lived his entire life with billions of voices in his mind, but he was brilliant, and he understood both what his people were and what they could become. What if we didn't need to stay linked? Ra asked during one late-night session, his form glowing with excitement. What if we created a system that lets us live normally but connect instantly when needed? Like a network that's turned off until you need it, A said, catching his idea. Individual switches that can all turn on at once. They called it the Sentinel Protocol. It took 2 years to develop, combining Velhari quantum biology with human engineering. The result was a biological modification that every Velhari could receive, allowing them to live fully separate, but maintain the ability to link instantly in emergencies. When Ra tested it on himself, he experienced true solitude for the first time in his life. He stood in the lab, feeling only his own thoughts in his mind, and he cried. I can hear myself, he whispered. Just me. I didn't know it could be like this. The Sentinel Protocol spread across all 3 Velhari worlds. Billions of crystalline beings felt separation for the first time in 5 years. Some found it frightening. Others found it liberating. All of them found it necessary. Elder Quan was among the last to receive the modification. When the linking dissolved and he became only himself again, he felt like he could breathe for the first time in years. The pain that had been his constant companion faded away. Thank you, he told President Sung when they met again. You saved us twice now. Once from death and once from the prison of our own gratitude. But the Sentinel Protocol's impact went beyond the Velhari. Word spread across the galaxy of what humanity had done, refusing to let their friends suffer even when that suffering benefited Earth. A dozen species approached Earth seeking alliance, not because they feared the Velhari's power, but because they were inspired by humanity's principles. They called themselves the Alliance of Witness, civilizations committed to protecting those who helped others. Even the Torvan, once part of the coalition that attacked New Velhara, sent ambassadors. They wanted to learn what humanity called compassion. They wanted to understand how to value life over power. The Galactic Council transformed. Laws were written protecting Good Samaritan species. Resources were allocated to help those in need. A new age began, one where helping others was seen as strength, not weakness. Captain Day, now 109, stood in a garden on Earth filled with 12 billion crystal flowers. Each flower was a gift from a single Velhari, containing a quantum memory, a personal message of thanks. She touched one at random, and a memory flooded her mind. A young Velhari child standing with her mother, watching human ships arrive at their dying world. The child's voice translated across decades and species. Who are they, mother? They are humans, child. They came to save us, and why? Because they believe in things worth more than life. Things like hope, things like kindness. Day smiled, tears running down her ancient face. President Sung stood beside her, having come to visit the old captain one last time. Do you regret it? Sung asked. Any of it? Never, Day replied. We showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. That compassion isn't weakness. That helping others isn't foolish. That standing with those in need matters more than any profit or power. The Velhari say they can never truly repay us, Sung said. Good, Day replied. Because we never wanted payment. We just wanted them to live. And now they can. Really live. That's all the thanks we ever needed. In orbit above Earth, a memorial station floated in space. It contained the names of every human who died saving the Velhari, and every human who died defending them. 12,847 names. Each one was carved in crystal that would last forever, maintained by Velhari engineers who volunteered for the honor. The memorial's inscription was simple. They stood when others watched. They gave when others took. They believed when others doubted. This is humanity. And below it, added by the Velhari themselves, to stand with Earth is never forgotten. The battle began at dawn on New Velhara, though the planet's sky was already filled with fire and light from the weapons above. Admiral Hyun's 400 ships formed a sphere around the Velhari world, their shields overlapping, creating a barrier between the planet and the 3,000 coalition warships that surrounded them. All ships, hold formation, Hyun commanded, her voice steady even as the first wave of missiles streaked toward them. We just need to buy time for evacuation ships to get the civilians out. But there would be no time. The coalition wasn't interested in waiting. Energy beams cut through space, slamming into human shields. The ships rocked and shook, their hulls groaning under the assault. Captain Mi, piloting a small destroyer on the front line, gritted her teeth as her console exploded in sparks. Shields at 40%, her engineer shouted over the alarms. We can't take much more of this. Then we take it anyway, Mi replied, keeping her ship steady. The battle was brutal and one-sided. Human ships fought with everything they had, but they were simply overwhelmed. The coalition had better weapons, stronger shields, more ships. They had every advantage except one. They didn't know what they were protecting mattered more than their own lives. By the end of the first day, Earth had lost 30 ships. By the end of the second day, 70 more were gone. The survivors were battered, running on backup power, held together by determination and desperate repairs. On the surface of New Velhara, the Velhari watched their friends die for them. Every crystalline being on the planet could see the battle in the sky, could see the human ships exploding one by one, could hear the last messages from the crews as they fell. Elder Quan stood in the great assembly hall, surrounded by billions of his people connected through quantum links. They had never done what they were about to do. Their species had never needed to, but they had spent 50 years learning from humanity, watching how humans stood together in impossible moments. Now they would show what gratitude meant when it was shared by 12 billion souls. My people, Quan said, his voice carrying through every quantum link on the planet and the two other Velhari worlds. The humans are dying for us. They have always stood with us, and now they fall because of us. We cannot let this continue. What can we do? Voices asked from everywhere and nowhere. We are not warriors. We have no weapons. We have something better, Quan replied. We have each other. We have always been able to link our minds for small things, to share thoughts and feelings. But what if we linked all of us? Every single Velhari in existence? The assembly fell silent. What he was suggesting had never been tried. To merge 12 billion minds into one consciousness would require each of them to give up their individual identity, to become part of something vast and terrifying and powerful. It will hurt, Quan warned. Our minds are not meant to merge this way. It will feel like dying, but the humans have shown us that some things are worth dying for. On the third day of battle, as another human ship exploded and Admiral Hyun prepared to give the order to retreat, something changed. Every Velhari on New Velhara stopped moving at the exact same moment. Their crystalline bodies began to glow, softly at first, then brighter and brighter until the entire planet shone like a second sun. The light pulsed in perfect rhythm, 12 billion beings breathing as one, and then the light reached out. On the battlefield, every missile, every energy beam, every kinetic round froze in space. Not slowed, not deflected. Simply frozen as if time itself had stopped. Thousands of weapons caught mid-flight hung motionless in the darkness. What? Admiral Hyun stared at her screens, unable to understand what she was seeing. What's happening? Elder Quan's voice filled every comm channel, every radio, every speaker in the entire system. But it wasn't just his voice anymore. It was 12 billion voices speaking as one, a harmony so perfect it made humans weep just to hear it. You would harm those who saved us. The coalition fleet tried to fire again, but their weapons wouldn't respond. Their targeting systems showed nothing wrong. Their reactors were at full power, but nothing happened when they pressed the triggers. You would kill those who sacrificed for us. High Chancellor Wu appeared on the coalition's command channel, his many arms gesturing frantically. What is this? What are they doing? You would destroy those who stood alone when others watched. And then the Velhari showed them what 12 billion linked minds could do. Every weapon on every coalition ship simply came apart. Not explosively, not violently. They just disassembled. Atom by atom, molecule by molecule, the weapons separated into their base components. Missiles became piles of metal and fuel. Energy cannons became neat stacks of crystal and wire. Kinetic guns became perfectly sorted heaps of components. All of it appeared outside the ships floating in space, harmless. 3,000 warships found themselves completely unarmed in less than a minute. Captain Mee stared out her viewport at the Coalition ships, their hulls now dotted with empty weapon mounts. Did they just... They disarmed the entire fleet, Hyun whispered. Every ship, every weapon, all at once. The Velhari collective spoke again, and this time there was something new in their voice, something that had never existed in their species before. Anger. In this galaxy, 3 rules now exist. Listen well, for we will never repeat them. The light from New Velhara pulsed brighter, and every being in the system felt it in their minds, their souls, the deepest part of whatever made them alive. First, Earth will never stand alone. Where humanity goes, we go. Who threatens humanity threatens us. Second, those who stood with Earth will be remembered. Their kindness will be written in the fabric of space itself, preserved until the stars grow cold. Third, those who threaten Earth will be forgotten. We will erase them from the memory of stars, remove them from the story of galaxies, make it as if they never existed. High Chancellor Wu tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't work. None of the Coalition commanders could speak. The Velhari had locked their communications. We are the Velhari. We are 12 billion minds linked as one. We did not know our full power because we never needed it. We never fought because we never had reason to. But 50 years ago, we learned what it means to stand for others. We learned it from humanity. The light pulsed one more time, and every Coalition ship's engines came online automatically, pointing them away from New Velhara. Leave now. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that the beings who value kindness will always be stronger than those who value only power. Tell them that humanity has friends who will shatter galaxies to protect them. The Coalition fleet jumped away, fleeing into hyperspace, running from a power they couldn't fight and didn't understand. Admiral Hyun sat in her command chair, her hands shaking. Her fleet had lost over 100 ships. Thousands of her people were dead, and they had been ready to die fighting. But they had won without firing another shot. On the surface, the light began to fade from the Velhari. They were separating again, becoming individuals, but something had changed. They had touched something vast and terrible and beautiful, and none of them would ever be quite the same. Elder Quan was the last to let go of the collective. He stood in the assembly hall, his crystalline body flickering weakly. Maintaining the link had nearly killed him, had nearly killed all of them. But they had endured, because that's what you did for those who had endured for you. Within hours, the Galactic Council issued a formal apology to Earth. They granted humanity protected benefactor status, a rank that had never existed before. They promised there would be no more sanctions, no more threats, no more cold dismissals, but everyone knew the truth. The Council wasn't acting out of respect. They were acting out of fear. Fear of what gratitude could do when it was shared by 12 billion souls. Fear of what would happen if humanity's friends decided to stop being merciful. Fear of learning what it really meant to stand against Earth. 50 years had passed since the rescue, and the galaxy looked very different now. The Velhari had settled on 3 worlds in neutral space, places humanity had helped them find and terraform. The crystalline beings had built new cities, started new lives, but they had never forgotten where those lives came from. Captain Day was old now, her hair white, her body tired. She lived in a quiet apartment overlooking the ocean on Earth, watching the waves and thinking about those days so long ago. Some people called her a hero. Others called her the woman who nearly bankrupted humanity for strangers. She didn't care much about either label anymore. Earth had struggled after the rescue. The money was gone. The ships were gone. Resources that should have built new colonies, new stations, new futures had instead been spent on saving the Velhari. There were food shortages for 5 years, energy rationing for 10. Some human colonies nearly failed. Ambassador Tay worked at the Galactic Council now, representing Earth among species that still looked down on humanity's foolish compassion. He sat in meetings where other species mocked Earth's weakness, where they laughed at the idea that saving lives mattered more than profit. High Chancellor Wu, the being who had refused to help the Velhari, still led the council. He was even more powerful now, respected for his logical approach to galactic matters. But something unexpected had happened to the Velhari on their new worlds. Given time and resources, they had changed. Their crystalline biology, which had always been unique, began to evolve. They discovered they could process information at incredible speeds, could interface with technology in ways no other species could match. Their scientists made breakthroughs that shouldn't have been possible. In 50 years, they advanced what would have taken other species 500. Dr. He was one of those scientists. She was young, born after the rescue, taught about humanity's sacrifice since she was a child. She worked in energy research, trying to find ways to help the humans who had saved her people. One day she succeeded. It's called zero-point energy, he explained to a group of human scientists. Her crystalline form glowed with excitement, flashing through colors faster than their computers could translate. We can extract power from the fabric of space itself. Unlimited clean energy. Forever. The humans stared at her designs, barely understanding them. This was technology centuries beyond anything they had. We also have quantum healing, another Velhari scientist added. We can repair damaged cells, cure diseases, extend life. And we've created communication systems that work instantly across any distance. They had more. Weapons that could tear apart stars, shields that could stop anything, ship drives that could cross the galaxy in hours instead of years. We want to share all of this with you, Elder Quan said. He was ancient now. His crystalline body dimmed with age, but his voice still carried authority. You saved us. Now let us help you. Ambassador Tay brought the offer back to Earth. The government debated for weeks. The technology would make humanity one of the most powerful species in the galaxy overnight. They could have everything they had lost and more, but they could also have weapons that would terrify every other species. We take only the energy and healing technology, Earth's president announced. We will not take the weapons. We didn't save the Velhari to become conquerors. The Velhari were surprised but accepted. They shared the peaceful technologies freely, asking nothing in return. Within months, Earth's energy crisis ended. Their hospitals could cure diseases that had killed millions. The struggling colonies thrived again, but news of the Velhari's gifts spread across the galaxy. High Chancellor Wu called an emergency council meeting. The Velhari possessed technology that could change the balance of power, he announced to the assembled species. They must share it with all council members equally. Ambassador Tay stood to respond. The Velhari are free people on free worlds. They can share their technology with whoever they choose. Then we choose Earth, Elder Quan said, his form appearing on the council screens. Only Earth. They stood with us when no one else would. They sacrificed everything for strangers. We will not give our gifts to those who left us to die. The council chamber erupted in angry voices. Species that had ignored the Velhari's death sentence now demanded their technology. Species that had mocked humanity's compassion now wanted the rewards of that compassion. This is unacceptable, Chancellor Wu declared. The council will not allow one species to monopolize such power. Then the council should have thought of that before they watched us die, Quan replied. And his image disappeared. The tensions grew quickly. Three powerful species, the Torvan hegemony, the Ashtari Confederacy, and the Drexian Unity, formed an alliance. They controlled vast fleets and resources. Together they represented nearly half the council's military might. Their message to the Velhari was simple: share the technology or face consequences. Trade sanctions came first. Velhari ships were turned away from council stations. Their merchants were banned from council markets. But the Velhari had Earth, and Earth opened its markets wide. Then came the border harassments. Velhari colony ships were stopped and searched. Their communications were jammed. Their supply lines were threatened. Ambassador Tay protested at every council meeting, but he was one voice against many. Earth's small fleet could protect human space, but they couldn't be everywhere the Velhari needed them. On Earth, Captain Day watched the news with growing concern. She saw where this was heading. She had seen it before in humanity's own bloody history. When peaceful requests failed, force came next. She picked up her old comm badge, the one she hadn't worn in 30 years, and contacted Admiral Hyun, the current commander of Earth's fleet. You're going to need help, Day said simply. From you, Captain? Hyun sounded surprised. From everyone who remembers why we saved them in the first place. 10 years after the Velhari shared their technology, The Coalition's patience ran out. 3,000 warships jumped into orbit around New Velhara, the largest Velhari settlement. It was more firepower than had been assembled in a century. Their ultimatum broadcast on all frequencies. You have 48 hours to share all technology equally among Council species, or we will take it by force. Admiral Hyun stood on the bridge of Earth's flagship, looking at the display showing the Coalition fleet. Earth had 400 ships. Not nearly enough, sir, her first officer said quietly. We can't fight that. We need to negotiate. No, Hyun said. We need to stand. She opened a channel to the Coalition fleet. This is Admiral Hyun of Earth's Defense Force. The Velhari are under human protection. If you attack them, you attack us. High Chancellor Wu appeared on her screen. Admiral, surely you're not serious. You're outnumbered 7-1. This is suicide, maybe, Hyun agreed. But we meant what we said 50 years ago. We stand with the Velhari. That hasn't changed. Elder Quan contacted Hyun directly, his form flickering with distress. Please don't do this. We will give them the technology. We will not let you die for us again. You don't get to decide that, Hyun replied gently. We saved you because it was right. We defend you now for the same reason. From her apartment on Earth, old Captain Day made one last broadcast. She sat in her chair wrapped in a blanket, looking at the camera with tired but fierce eyes. We didn't save the Velhari because we wanted payment, she said. We saved them because it was right, and we stand with them now for the same reason. That is what it means to be human. That is what it will always mean to be human. The message played on every human ship, every human station, every human world. And the crews of those 400 ships, outnumbered and outgunned, moved into defensive positions around New Velhara. The Coalition opened fire. Admiral Jin arrived in the system aboard the massive carrier Indomitable, and with him came hope. He was an old man, with gray hair and lines around his eyes from decades of command, but when he saw the crystalline cities of Velhara Prime below, those eyes filled with determination. 12 billion, he said to himself, standing in the war room with a dozen other captains around the holographic display. They said it was impossible. It might be, sir, said one of the younger officers. Jin smiled. Then we'll do the impossible. That's what humans are good at. The operation was massive beyond anything humanity had ever attempted. Dr. Na, a brilliant engineer who had designed Earth's fastest ships, worked without sleep for 3 days straight to create emergency cryopods. They were simple, barely more than freezing chambers, but they would keep the Velhari alive during transport. We can fit 200 per cargo ship, Na explained, her hands shaking from exhaustion as she pointed at the blueprints. 400 if we stack them. It's not comfortable, but it'll work. How many ships do we have? Jin asked. 4,312, more arriving every day. Jin did the math in his head. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. But they would make it work. They had to. On the surface of Velhara Prime, Quan worked with his people to organize the evacuation. The Velhari had never known war, never known panic, but now they faced both. The sky grew darker each day as their star collapsed inward. The temperature swung wildly between burning heat and freezing cold. You must board the ships in order, Quan told the crowds gathered at the evacuation points. His form glowed steady and calm even though inside he felt nothing but fear. The humans are risking everything for us. We will not waste their sacrifice with disorder. The Velhari listened. They formed lines that stretched for miles, families holding on to each other, their crystalline bodies reflecting the red light of their dying sun. The human volunteers worked around the clock. They built orbital platforms in space, giant stations where Velhari could wait before being loaded onto ships. They set up medical tents on the surface for those too weak to travel. They learned to communicate through light instead of sound, flashing messages with colored lamps. One volunteer, a young pilot named Sue, flew her shuttle between the surface and the platforms 18 hours a day. She barely slept, barely ate. When other pilots told her to rest, she just shook her head. Every trip saves 200 lives. I'll rest when they're all safe. But the star was collapsing faster than predicted. What should have been 4 months became 3, then 2. We need to move faster, Jin told his captains. Double the trips. Triple them. Sir, the radiation levels are getting dangerous, one captain warned. Our shields can't take much more. Then we'll replace the ships. But we don't leave anyone behind. The crews pushed their vessels to the breaking point. Engines overheated. Hull plating cracked from temperature stress. Ships limped back to the orbital platforms, trailing sparks and smoke, only to be patched up and sent back down. Losses began to mount. The Morning Star lost its engines during ascent and crashed into the ocean. All hands lost. The Bright Future took too much radiation and had to be evacuated, its crew rescued by other ships. The promise of tomorrow simply disappeared, lost somewhere between the surface and orbit. Each loss hit hard, but the humans kept coming. For every ship that fell, 2 more took its place. Dr. Na worked miracles, improving the cryopods every day, finding ways to fit more Velhari into less space. She slept 3 hours a night on a cot in her lab, surrounded by blueprints and half-eaten meals. "We're going to make it," she told anyone who would listen. "We have to." On day 97, disaster nearly struck. A solar flare erupted from the dying star, a wave of radiation that would have killed every Velhari still on the surface and fried every ship's electronics. But the humans had been preparing for this. Captain Day, still commanding the Horizon's Promise, led a squadron of ships directly into the flare's path. They activated every shield they had, creating a barrier between the radiation and the planet below. "Hold the line," Day shouted over the comm as her ship shook and sparked around her. "Just hold it for 5 minutes." The ships formed a wall of pure energy, their shields overlapping, creating a barrier that no sane person would think possible. The radiation hit like a hammer, and one by one, ships began to fail. The Defiant exploded in a ball of light. The Courage lost all power and drifted away. Sue's shuttle, the small ship she had flown so many times, started to fail. Her shields were at 2%. 1%, I can't hold it, she said over the comm, her voice steady even as alarms screamed around her. "Eject," Day ordered. "Get out now." "No," Sue replied. "There are 200 Velhari on the platform behind me. If I move, they die. Sue, please, tell my family I love them. Tell the Velhari. Tell them we humans are glad we could help." Sue pushed her failing shields to maximum, channeling every bit of power her shuttle had left. The ship glowed white-hot and then it exploded, but in that moment, it gave the other ships enough time to close the gap. The platform was saved. 200 Velhari lived because one human refused to move. When the flare passed, Quan stood on the surface and looked up at the space where Sue's ship had been. He placed his hand over where his heart would be and made a vow that no one else could hear. A vow that would shake the galaxy. The evacuation continued. Day after day, ship after ship, life after life. The humans worked until they collapsed, then got up and worked more. They gave everything they had. Admiral Jin barely left the bridge. His officers brought him food, which he rarely touched. His hair turned from gray to white in those long weeks. But he never stopped coordinating, never stopped pushing, never stopped believing. On day 127, the last Velhari stepped aboard the last ship. It was a small child, barely able to walk, carried by her mother. Quan came with them, the very last to leave his world. "Is that everyone?" Jin asked over the comm. "Yes, Admiral," came the reply. "All 12,400,000,000. Then get them out. Now." The fleet jumped to hyperspace, thousands of ships disappearing in flashes of light. 6 hours later, Velhara Prime Star went supernova. The planet, the cities, everything the Velhari had built over 10,000 years turned to dust and fire, but every single Velhari lived. The cost was heavy. 847 ships lost. 12,000 humans dead. Earth's economy was in ruins, every resource poured into the rescue. The Galactic Council issued a formal censure, calling humanity's actions reckless and irresponsible. But when Admiral Jin stood before the cameras to answer questions, he was asked if it was worth it. He looked at the camera, at the billions watching across human space, and he smiled. "We saved 12 billion lives. You ask me if it was worth it? I'd do it again tomorrow." In the refugee ships, the Velhari watched and listened. They saw humans defending what they had done, saw them standing proud despite their losses. They saw a species that valued life over profit, courage over safety, compassion over cold logic, and they remembered. Every single one of them remembered. Captain Day stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Promise, watching the stars drift past the viewing screen. The ship hummed quietly around her, a comfortable sound after 3 years in deep space. They were mapping new sectors, far from Earth, far from anyone, really. It was supposed to be a quiet mission. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Hai from the communication station. Her fingers moved quickly across the controls, her face lit by the blue glow of her screens. It's a distress signal, but not in any language I recognize. Day walked over, her boots soft against the metal floor. Can you clean it up? Yun, the science officer, was already working on it. His screen showed waves of data, patterns that twisted and turned like dancing light. It's beautiful, he whispered. The signal itself is encoded in light frequencies. Whoever sent this doesn't use sound to communicate. The bridge fell silent as they listened. The computer translated the signal into words, and what they heard made everyone stop and stare. Please, anyone. Our star is dying. We cannot leave. 12 billion souls, please. Day felt her heart sink. 12 billion. That was more than Earth's entire population. Where is it coming from? Yun pointed to a nearby star system on the map. 3 light years away. We could be there in 2 days. Set course, Day said without hesitation. Hai turned in her chair. Captain, shouldn't we report this to the Galactic Council first? That's protocol. We will, Day replied. After we know what we're dealing with. 2 days later, they arrived at a site that would haunt Day's dreams forever. The star at the center of the system was dying, but not the slow death stars usually faced. It was collapsing in on itself, growing darker and hotter at the same time. Around it, a beautiful blue planet spun, covered in cities that gleamed like crystals in the fading light. Life signs? Dee asked. Everywhere, Yun said, his voice shaking. The whole planet is covered in them. But Captain, they have no ships, no satellites, nothing that could get them off that world. How long do they have? 3 months. Maybe 4. Then the star will explode. Day contacted the planet. The beings who answered were like nothing she had ever seen. They appeared on the screen as tall crystalline figures that seemed to be made of living light. They spoke in colors and patterns, which the computer struggled to translate. One of them, who called himself Quan, became their main contact. He was young by his people's standards, and he had taught himself to understand how sound-based species communicated. We are the Velhari, Quan explained, his form shifting through shades of blue and green. We have lived here for 10,000 years. We knew our star was old, but this is happening too fast. We sent probes to other worlds, but they would take centuries to arrive. We never needed to leave before. How many of you are there? Tay asked, though she already knew the answer. 12 billion, 400 million. Hai drew in a sharp breath. Even Yun looked away from his screens, the weight of that number settling on all of them. We've contacted the Galactic Council, Day said. They'll send help. But the Council's response came 3 hours later, and it was not what they hoped. Chancellor Wu, a tall being with too many arms and cold black eyes, appeared on their screen. Captain Day, the Council has reviewed the situation. The Velhari possess no strategic resources, no military capability, and no existing treaties with any Council species. The cost of evacuation would be, one, substantial. We have classified this as a non-intervention priority. Non-intervention? Day felt her anger rising. They're going to die. All of them. That is unfortunate, but the Council cannot justify the expense for a species of no strategic value. You are ordered to document what you can and move on to your next assignment. The screen went dark. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Hai said quietly, We have to follow orders, Captain. No, Day said. We don't. Yun looked up. Captain? Contact Earth. Tell them we need every ship they can send. Every transport, every freighter, every passenger liner. Tell them... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Tell them that 12 billion people are going to die unless we do something. And ask them what they want humanity to be known for in this galaxy. The Council will be furious, Hai warned. Let them be furious. Day turned back to the viewing screen, where the dying star pulsed with an angry red light. Contact the Velhari. Tell Quan we're going to get them out. All of them? Yun asked. All of them. When Quan heard the news, his crystalline form blazed so bright it hurt to look at him. Why? Why would you do this? We have nothing to give you. We are strangers. Day smiled, though her eyes were wet with tears. Because it's the right thing to do. That's reason enough. Earth's response came 12 hours later. Every news channel was covering the story. The Velhari and their dying world were on every screen, and humanity was watching. The government didn't order ships to help. They didn't need to. Thousands of ships volunteered within the first hour. Military vessels changed their routes. Cargo ships dumped their loads at the nearest stations. Passenger liners announced they would make one last trip before retirement. Even old colony ships, decades past their prime, fired up their engines one more time. The message from Earth was simple. We're coming. Hold on. Captain Day stood on the bridge and watched as the first ships began arriving. One by one, they appeared in the system, jumping in from Earth and every human colony in between. Hundreds of ships, then thousands. Quan stood beside her, his form flickering with emotions the computer couldn't translate. I don't understand, he said softly. You could lose everything doing this. Your economy, your reputation, maybe even your lives. Why? Day put her hand on the console, wishing she could touch his crystalline shoulder. Because someday, someone is going to ask us what we did when we found 12 billion people facing death, and we want to be able to say we saved them, every single one. The rescue was about to begin, and with it something that would change the galaxy forever. Neither humanity nor the Velhari knew it yet. But this moment, this choice, would echo through the stars for generations to come. Outside the ship, the dying star pulsed, counting down the days they had left.